Well, ladies and gentlemen, we move on with our program. I have the pleasure of introducing our other speaker, our final speaker. This man has been at every level of the John Birch Society, as a local member, and then a chapter leader, a section leader. He finally became the director of field activities, coordinator, then a major coordinator, then the director of field activities. In 1991, he was named the chief executive officer of the society. Now, some people might say, well, why was he chosen to be the chief executive officer of our organization? That's a very important post. That's the #1 post. Well, the answer is management capabilities and fiscal good sense and responsibility, and a strong believer in accountability all across the board, and a very strong capability at leadership, and the fact that he's pure John Birch, right? I want you to know that I sleep better with him in his post, and I work more effectively because of his leadership. And so it's always a delight for me to be able to introduce this man, my good friend and our leader, Mr. G. Vance Smith. Right. Thank you. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. This has been a couple of great days as we've met in meetings with the executive committee and with the council, and this afternoon with our Robert Welch Club, and this evening. This is one of the most energizing weekends I remember. I'm grateful to be here, to be a part of this. I want to express appreciation to all of those that have worked so hard to make it possible. This room was full to capacity. That didn't just happen. That's a result of a lot of effort, a lot of work. I know that many of you have labored in this effort, and I want to express appreciation to each of you. I would like to single out our local leader here, young man that I keep calling him a young man because he looks young, who has held the post now of major coordinator for just a few months and worked so hard to make this and other events possible. Really appreciate Dennis Dalton. Dennis, stand up. I want to acknowledge someone else, too. You hear from Jack a lot. Jack is our spokesman. He's our ideological leader. We really appreciate Jack. He, understand, had a great exposure on the radio station the other day, and a few million citizens in this community know that there's a John McManus and a John Birch Society. But I'd like to acknowledge another member of our team that is absolutely essential in all parts of our work. It's a man that many of you know because he served some staff time up here as a coordinator and as a major coordinator, our Vice President, Tom Gow. I'd like to thank Tom Gow for all he's done. It's fun to come to these events and to meet the people that have been in the trenches for years. We've been around a long time, and there are many that have been faithful over many, many years. It's great to be with you, and it's great also today to have been able to shake hands and meet individuals who have come into our organization in very recent years and recent months. And I'm aware that there are those that are here for the first time, not even members of the John Birch Society, just taking a look at us tonight. And we appreciate you.
We're glad to have you here. In 1964, I was one of those new people. My wife and I went to Highland High School in auditorium in Salt Lake City. We heard Robert Welch speak. There were over 2,000 people in that hall. After the speech, we were spellbound and were willing to stand, must have been over an hour, in a long line so that we could get up and shake the hand of this great patriot. I had the opportunity over the years on the staff after that to spend a lot of time with Mr. Welch. Not that I knew him intimately like many who were in the office in Belmont, but he would come each year to Colorado Springs where we would host a Rocky Mountain rally, and Mr. Welch would be there almost every year to speak. I got to know him quite well. And I've always felt the same feeling that I felt in 1964, that I was in the presence of greatness. If I had the privilege of standing in the presence of a Patrick Henry or George Washington, I would know that I was standing in the presence of the great patriots. I would have felt no more esteem for them than I did Robert Welch. Now, during those years, I certainly had no idea that I would be involved in a leadership role of this level. I served for 13 years as a coordinator, and I loved every minute of it. And I looked again at those leaders and what they were doing and the great ability of Robert Welch. It's humbling for me, for Jack, for Tom, for the others here, to hold this position of leadership and these responsibilities of leadership that we have. Recently, I came across a poem. Let me share it with you. The God of the great endeavor gave me a torch to bear, and I lifted it high above my head in the cold and murky air. Straightway, with glad hosannas, the people acclaimed its light, and they followed me as I carried the torch through the dark and starless night. Till mad with the praises of people and drunken with vanity, I forgot it was the torch that drew them, and fancied they followed me. And my arm grew sore and weary of holding the shining load, and my tired feet went stumbling over the hilly road. I fell with the torch beneath me, and in a moment the flame was out. But lo, from a throng a stripling youth sprang forth with a mighty shout, caught up the smoldering torch and lifted it high again, till fanned by the winds of heaven it fired the souls of men. As I lay alone in the darkness, the feet of the trampling crowd passed o'er, and far beyond me their voices proclaimed aloud. And I learned in the deepening shadows this glorious verity. 'Tis the torch that people follow, whoe'er the bearer may be. I'd like to speak this evening on the subject of leadership. I'd like to speak to the subject of an organization that is principle-centered. 39 years ago, the John Birch Society was formed. Robert Welch, its founder, recognized the need and accepted the challenge to give leadership to those who were serious and willing to work hard to preserve freedom. There were a virtual plethora of patriotic and anti-communist organizations and study groups out there, but they seemingly had no goal or focus. Mr. Welch gave great thought to his organization and its structure. He intended it to be a lasting and growing body that would carry on for generations to come. The body, however, could only grow if its feet were set solidly on a firm foundation of unchangeable principles. Mr. Welch knew it would not be easy to convince rugged individualists, of the need to work voluntarily under a monolithic leadership. It was not easy in his day, and we're finding that it's not easy in our day. Perhaps this can best be described by our friend Ed Griffin, those of you that remember the film This is the John Birch Society in the book, when Ed said, just because we're individualists doesn't mean we have to move our piano by ourselves. In the few minutes allotted me here, I can mention only briefly some of the details and principles that Mr. Welch felt were both important for our organization and that would be understandable and acceptable to a reachable broad cross-section of the American people. First of all, the John Birch Society would have to be established as an educational organization. Why? Because Mr. Welch discovered that the American people had a very poor understanding of the basic principles of freedom. The enemies of freedom had long been organized and had already led media, educational organizations, and throngs of people to false principles and false understandings regarding country and government. In fact, Mr. Welch thought that fixing this problem was of paramount importance. He stated that all we must find and build and use to win is sufficient understanding. It's interesting recently when Congressman Bob Barr said that what has to take place if the American people are going to deal with what's wrong with the president, this administration, and start the impeachment process is the understanding of the American people. They have to have an understanding. Isn't it interesting? So rather than to simply react to real or perceived problems, we in the John Birch Society were asked to carefully educate a large segment of the population. With new and enlightened understanding, the people would insist on the restoration of correct government and correct principles. What was it that Mr. Welch asked of us in those early years? And is the task at hand that much different today? Let's look at a few of those tasks and decide. The American people needed to know and understand the miracle of the Constitution of the United States. They needed to know something of the thinking and character of the inspired framers. And they needed to know that they stood to lose the blessings of constitutional protection of their freedoms if they were not vigilant in protecting them. Our nation was built on godly principles, by God-fearing people, and by people who placed their reliance completely upon the God of heaven. It became, as Mr. Welch would often identify it, as a Christian-style civilization that simply had to be saved. Mr. Welch also brought to us an awareness of the forces organized and employed to corrupt our system and rob us of our freedoms. And without equivocation, Mr. Welch stated early on that we were fighting a satanic conspiracy. Made sense, didn't it? A constitution, a constitutional republic, rights that come from God, a government, a people who could stand uprightly because of principles that were eternal, God-given rights. Would it be less than a satanic effort, a satanic conspiracy that would work to destroy those? So educational programs were launched to create awareness. But education without action was never Mr. Welch's plan. He also offered leadership for campaigns to deal with specific threats to our freedoms. I'll name just a few. You old-timers will remember more than I'm going to mention. All of these were things that he wanted us to work on to both educate the American people as to their system and also inform them of the threats. He wanted us to know the difference between republics and democracies. simple point. The American people had not been taught. He started a campaign to impeach Earl Warren. Started a campaign to get us out of the United Nations and to get the United Nations out of the United States. A campaign to support your local police and keep them independent. An ad hoc committee tacked truth about civil turmoil, the truth about what was going on in the civil rights movement and other civil disobedience. He organized the movement to restore decency. Motor Read, many of you remember that. We all rolled up our sleeves and worked hard in efforts to stop the sex education in the schools. Understanding the importance. Stop the Panama Canal giveaway, and many more. All of those programs, projects, campaigns, again for the purpose of educating people on principles and showing how a conspiracy was working. Each program and campaign was presented first for education and second to provide leadership of grave concern. Let's go back to the earlier question. Is our present task that much different? The answer is obviously no. Our procedures, methods, and principles are the same. Sure, in Mr. Welch's day, as at present, there were those who would criticize and complain that we are just an educational organization. Well, they're right. We are. But they're terribly wrong if they are thinking that ignorant masses being led towards slavery can be changed to becoming ignorant masses working diligently for freedom. Education is the key. Understanding is still essential. Or as Mr. Welch would state, action without education only brings about frustration or fanaticism. Today, the John Birch Society is working under 4 key mission areas. All 4 are enormously important, and all will help create understanding and will help expose the effects of the New World Order insiders. Let's take a moment to discuss those 4 areas. Start with number 2. Stop the New World Order and get us out of the United Nations. This is an important general area. Again, there is a plan. There is a plan to have a one-world government. Jack McManus makes the point so often and so well. This nation is great because it recognized that the rights came from God. If we give up nationhood and move into some conglomerate, then where will the rights come from? There are no other nations, and certainly not the United Nations, that is suggesting that the citizens of a world government will have God-given rights. We have to work diligently in this key mission area to stop the New World Order and to get us out of the United Nations. Number 3 would be to preserve and restore our Constitution. We have to have that solid bulwark, that foundation to build on. This is an extremely important part of our effort, and that's why we're engaged constantly in campaigns to stop the Conference of the States, to stop the term limits, to stop the con calls. We've got to do all in our power to help the American people understand what the Constitution is and love it and embrace it and do everything they can to preserve it. Number 4 in our 4 mission areas is Congress is the key. Our system is still intact. There are 433 other congressmen. Don't let these 2 leave until you're absolutely sure that they'll vote 100% the rest of their lives. These are wonderful men. The American people have to know that they can still control their government. They can still have their freedoms through a system that's intact. That if they can reach out, insist that those 435 people that go back to Washington every 2 years and have to raise their hand and swear to God to uphold the Constitution, if the American people can understand that, gain that understanding and put that to work, our problems will go away in a hurry. Can you just imagine 435 Bob Barrs and Ron Pauls? For 25 years, we've been working on a program called TRIM. Dr. Paul has certainly told us the value of TRIM in Washington. We know the value. Congress is the key. We're engaging in a new campaign, a new educational campaign with this same specific thought in mind. It's an educational campaign to impeach Bill Clinton. Our objective, while it is definitely to impeach Bill Clinton, moreover, is this business of having the American people understand that the House of Representatives have that responsibility. There are impeachable offenses. Only the House of Representatives can deal with those impeachable offenses. They're the only ones that can start that process. And you and I and all of the American citizens can get behind that and make it work. Why are the American people tolerating this insider controlled barrage of filth that's coming from Washington? Because the American people haven't got leadership. They don't know what to do. Well, we're going to provide the leadership. We're going to show them that we can have a campaign that they can understand. And the campaign is to put the pressure on all 435 members of the House and keep it there and not take any nonsense that we're moving as fast as we can or we're going to start the hearings in 72 months. But we are going to do it now, and we're going to put that kind of pressure on the House of Representatives. Number one of our fourfold mission, or our four key areas, is our most important one, and that's recruitment. That's bringing people into the John Birch Society. That's doubling and redoubling and on again our efforts so that we can take this battle to all the corners of this nation and to really make it work. In the old days, we just called it birching. And as Jack McManus said in a couple of meetings this weekend, if you're not having fun birching, you're doing something wrong. Well, are you birching? Think about it. Are you birching people? Are you having fun? Do you always have 2 or 3 copies of the conspiracy issue of the magazine with you, some pamphlets, some bumper strips? Let's get back to birching, and let's just birch everybody. Let's birch everybody. What I've explained briefly are the focus areas of today's John Birch Society. These are the key areas in which the present leadership has made commitment and from whence our strategic plan for preserving freedom has been built. These areas are in harmony with the past leadership and have, so far as we know, the full support of all our present advisory councils. From these 4 areas come all the programs, projects, and campaigns in which our membership is asked to participate. Mr. Welch was in his 60th year when he founded our organization. And while it was his personal dynamic leadership that guided us for 25 years, it was his investment in structuring an organization built on principles, not individuals, not personalities, that would move us forward for generations to come. The John Birch Society, in our 39 years, has become the beacon on the hill. It's the light that people are looking to. We simply have to enlarge that light. It is my hope and prayer that tens of thousands of additional Americans will take advantage of our invitation to participate in this epic undertaking, and that we will all dedicate ourselves to the principles of less government, more responsibility, and with God's help, a better world. Thank you very much.